Hey guys, welcome back. Today is our first day of our indoor seed sowing schedule, which is so exciting and something I always look forward to, especially in the wintertime, because there's not a whole lot going on in the garden. This is the activity that keeps us going and getting us excited for the springtime and the magic that is going to be in our gardens once we start transplanting all of our little seedling babies outdoors. So it is a very, very exciting moment. Now, before we jump in today's video, I do recommend you go back and watch a couple of the other videos I posted a little bit earlier, because that also talks about all of the flowers that we're going to be starting, what I recommend you think about when you're buying flower seeds, and I also show you our seed starting setup indoors, so you kind of get a full detail and breakdown of everything we're doing. That way you're kind of growing along with me, and we are going to be super successful. I can just feel it this year. It's going to be a great year, and I am so excited about it. Now today we are going to be working outside, and I'm going to show you my little setup and how I like to do this. It's a little bit untraditional or unconventional, I guess I would say, but it's something that works for me. It's very fast, and it allows me to set up so many of my trays super quick. And there's a couple of other little tricks that I learned last year, or that I experimented with last year, and I had the best germination rate. Like all of our seeds, I probably had about 98% germination rates with everything, and everything just did so well. So I am going to follow the exact same steps that I did last year. These are the little tweaks that I've made that I found work for me. I'll talk about what the traditional way of doing things are, and then I will show you how I do it. And I'm very excited about the way I did it, and it worked really well. So I'm just going to keep doing it this way. Now, in one of our last videos, we did a winter sowing video, which we sow our seeds outdoors. This is us starting seeds indoors. Here is my little setup that I like to do outdoors here in the front. It's super easy. It's so efficient. Now, at one point, I was doing this on our deck outside. I also had a table that I would do this on outdoors. But honestly, I feel like doing it in the back of my truck is just so easy, so fast. And I love it because it's very tall, so you're not bending over so much. So I just get set up like this. I start a bunch of trays. I bring them indoors, or I might seed outdoors, and then we transfer them into our seed starting room. One day I will have a greenhouse, and I will be able to do all of this inside that greenhouse. But for now, this is what works for me. And it's just, again, fast and easy. And I can get messy out here, not worry about getting dirt and soil everywhere indoors. So I just set up the trays outdoors, I bring them inside, and then we start sowing our seeds. Now here is where I venture off and do my own thing in terms of what soil I use and how I set up my trays. Traditionally, you want to use seed starting mix. Seed starting mix is the perfect soil to start your seedlings in because it's the perfect environment for them to thrive. But last year I used potting mix, and I had the best results. So that is what I am going to be doing this year again. If you want to try the potting mix route, I highly recommend you pick something that's very loose and has a lot of perlite in it. And if it doesn't, then I recommend you add perlite to it, because that is going to allow our seedlings to do better. And it's also going to aerate the soil a little bit more, because sometimes potting mix can be a little bit dense, and you want something that's really airy for your seedlings. Now with the potting mix, I don't sift it. I don't do anything fancy to it. The only thing I do is add a little perlite to it if it doesn't have enough of it already. Before you actually fill your trays with the soil, you want to make sure that you moisten it. You don't want it to be soggy wet, but you want to be able to squeeze it and have it kind of hold its form without dripping wet, and then you put that into your trays. When you're done filling your trays, you want to make sure that you're tapping them just to get all of the air out. That way you know if you need to add more soil. I usually pack mine down just a tad, and then I will tap them down, and then I will add a little bit of soil if it needs it. After that, you're ready to sow your seeds. However, this is also where I venture off. Before I actually sow my seeds, I hose everything down with water and just get the soil a little bit more wet. I just found that doing this allows me to skip the step of having to spray them after I sow the seeds and after I put in the vermiculite, because the soil is pretty moist at that point that it'll start absorbing that vermiculite really nicely and get that wet. So I don't have to come in with my spray bottle and spray everything down after I get them all sown in. Now, before we start sowing our seeds, you do have to do a little bit of research and find out when you can start sowing specific seeds. The first thing you're going to do is find out when your last frost date is. That is a very quick Google search. You just put in your city and state and then type in last average frost date, and that will give you your date. Now, the date is important because that allows you to count back so you can determine what seeds you're going to start. For example, one of the seeds that we're going to be starting today is verbena, and you should sow verbena indoors 10 to 12 weeks before your average last frost date. For me, my average last frost date is around April 14, so we're right about in that 12-13 week period. So that is when I start sowing these. For things like zinnias that need to be started 4 to 6 weeks before our average last frost date, I won't start those yet, because what will happen is they will start growing just fine, but you're probably going to have to up pot them, and I don't have time to do that. I know a lot of people will up pot their seedlings. I don't like to do that. That is why I like to stay focused and really start everything on a schedule. That way I'm not having to up pot things or I'm trying to rush to get things out. I just stagger everything perfectly. I do my succession planting. That way I have enough space. That way I'm not overflowing into other racks and I can get everything out in perfect time. If for whatever reason your seed packet doesn't tell you when to sow your seeds, you can also just search that, or you can also go to Johnny Seeds, and I believe they have a calculator that you can just put in your last average frost date, and then it will give you a list of all of the seeds that you can start depending on what they are and how many weeks out you have to plan to start sowing those indoors. Now, we are going to be going out of town for our late anniversary celebration. It was last month and we didn't get to celebrate because we were so busy. So we are going up north for a couple of days, which I'm really excited about. So I'm only going to be starting 3 seeds today, and we have northern sea oats, which is just a beautiful, beautiful grass. I also have black-eyed Susan Cherokee Sunset, and then I also have verbena. This is the Brazilian vervain verbena, and I cannot wait to have more of these. We have one verbena plant, or maybe we have a couple of verbena plants, and I just want to start adding more and more of these into our garden, and these also make a beautiful cut flower. Now for the fun, let's start sowing our seeds. I'm so excited. Now with the seeds that we're going to be starting today, these are all pretty tiny, and usually the packet will tell you things like it needs light for germination. That means you're not going to really put anything on top of them. But in terms of sowing depth, you typically want to plant them about twice what the seed size is. So for example, sweet peas are pretty big seeds, so you can probably plant those about like 1/4 of an inch down. So just kind of keep that in mind if the packets don't tell you how deep you need to go. Again, with these small seedlings, they're really surface sown, and then I'll do a light layer of the vermiculite on top, and we'll talk about that in just a sec. All right, for these small seeds, what I like to do is just come in with the seed packet, and you make just a little point with your envelope, and then you just start dropping them in very gently. And with these, I'm not going to create any little crater or anything. I'm just going to surface sow these and then do a light layer of the vermiculite, just like that. If you don't want to do it this way, you can also take a little dish, just like this, and then you dump your seeds in there. Gosh, they're so tiny. And then you're going to take either like a toothpick or a plant tag like this. Now this is really gross, but you're just going to lick it, or just have a little, a little cup full of water. And you see how small that little seed is? That's probably really hard to see, but we picked it up, and now you can go in and drop it into the soil. So that is one other way you can do it. I usually go the envelope prop because it's very fast and efficient. So let me just put those back in here, and I am going to come in and tag them with our little plant tags. So this was verbena. And then I also like to put the date on the back. That way we can keep track of germination rates. So I will put this at the very beginning of where we started sowing, because I'm going to use this tray for multiple seeds. I will put the verbena tag here. Once I start a new seed, I will put the tag right where it begins. So next, let's do our northern oats. And you can see these are a tad bit bigger. So for these, I'm just going to make the tiniest little well. And you can come back and just fill this either with soil to cover them up or vermiculite, which is what I prefer. Now the vermiculite is really nice to use because it helps with moisture retention and it helps with damping off, which is a fungal disease. And I've noticed once I started using that fine vermiculite, we've had much more success with our seedlings. And these are from 2023, so I'm going to go ahead and just do 2 to 3 seeds per cell. That way we have better germination rates. Now let's label that. So those were the northern sea oats and ends on this cell. And then finally, we are going to do our Black-Eyed Susan Cherokee Sunset. These seeds are very, very small. All right, so we'll just put our plant tag right there. And now we're going to come in with our vermiculite. This is the one that I like to use. It's very thin and very, very fine, you guys will see. And this just has worked so well for me. So we'll just do a little fine layer on the top. Even with some seeds that say it needs light for germination, I do a very thin layer and found that that worked really well. If you're worried, then you can skip covering those that need light germination, but I've never had an issue with it. The other nice thing about using the vermiculite is it helps these little cells not dry out as quick. And do you see how the vermiculite is starting to get wet just from that soil being pretty wet? So this again takes away the step of having to spray this down once we're all done. So again, it's all about efficiency with me. The quicker and the more trays I can get ready and sown, the better it's going to be, especially if you have a ton of seeds to start. This is such an efficient way of doing it. Now what I'll do is just put in my bottom tray and put in our cells inside, and we will cover this with a humidity dome, just like this. And now we are ready to go. So that is my technique of starting thousands of seeds. I just found that this is so easy. I can come outside, set up as many trays that I want, depending on what I'm going to be sowing that day, do all of the dirty work out here, and then just bring it indoors. And it's just easy. There's no fuss, there's no mess. And it's just great. Now these will go indoors and I'll put them right under the grow lights. I'll show you guys here in just a sec. And once I see about 50 to 60% germination rate, because these will germinate at a different time, but I don't worry about keeping the humidity dome on for too long. It's really only for like the beginning first few days. But once I start seeing germination, I will go ahead and remove the humidity dome and put the trays right up against the light. That way they're not going to be spindly or leggy. We're just going to put them right underneath the light. And I talked about that in a previous video, and I'll pop up a picture of what I mean when I say you put them right underneath the light. Now, typically I like to sow 1 seed per cell. However, there are certain flowers that you can actually sow 3, 4, 5 seeds per cell, and you can transplant them outdoors because they actually do better in little clusters versus than a single flower like a zinnia would require. And we'll talk more about that in another video because we do have a ton of flowers to start together, and I do have some tips and tricks along the way for those other flowers as well that I'm excited to share with you guys. One quick thing I wanted to talk about before we take this tray inside, and that is watering. You do not want to allow your trays to go dry, but you also don't want to overwater them. So it's going to require you to do a little bit of babysitting in the beginning to kind of understand how quickly they dry out and how often they're going to need to be watered. Now, I always recommend you bottom water. It's so much better. You're not going to dislodge anything. You're not going to move anything or risk those seedlings washing away. So bottom watering is the best for this, and I'm going to show you that right now. Now, say you're getting ready to water, which in the beginning, I'm probably watering them, oh, I don't know, once a day, once they start to germinate. So I will just add, and I will usually do this in our sink inside one of our bathrooms. And it usually takes me about, oh gosh, 10, 15 minutes to do everything, depending on how many trays I have. So I just fill the corner with water, and I fill it all the way up as much as I can. I allow the soil to wick up and get everything moist. And you can tell the soil will be dark or your vermiculite will be dark, so you know you've watered it well. And you can always just pick up your tray and see how it feels. And then you're going to dump the excess water out. I usually will do this into a bucket because you will have soil runoff. And if you're doing this inside, you don't want to clog your sink. So you can just dump this into a bucket and then dump that outside. So for example, I just lift the tray up with my finger. I just drain that all out, and then they go back under the grow lights. So this is how all of our seedlings will start. We'll just have the humidity dome, and they'll be under the light about this height. And then once they start to germinate, let's just pretend you have a bunch of beautiful babies in here that have germinated. We will bump the lights all the way down and put them right underneath the light, just like that. And let me give you a close-up of what that would look like. So do you see how they're very close, almost touching the light? That's exactly what we want. And as they start to grow, we will move the lights up, but always keeping them right above the seedlings. All right, guys, well, I think that will do it for today's project. I just wanted to come out here and show you guys how I like to get this done. Again, we are going out of town, so I like to be home when I start massive amounts of seeds because I like to monitor everything. So I'm only going to do this tray and have mom take a look at them and make sure they're doing okay. But when we get back, we will have a ton more seeds to get started, which I am so looking forward to. I also hope this video inspires you to color outside the lines and find out what works for you. Again, using seed mix is probably the best route if you're beginning. If you don't know too much about soil, or you're uncomfortable with using potting soil, or you're just not sure, definitely do seedling mix. However, I don't think I will ever go back to seedling mix now that I had such great success with this potting mix. I am so excited about it, and I cannot wait just to see how our seedlings do this year. Anyways, I hope some of these tips and tricks for seed starting has helped you. Let me know down below if you had tried anything different that is kind of untraditional and outside of the norm, because that's always fun to learn about. And we can always do a Q&A if you guys are interested on seed starting. That way we can answer all of the questions that you may have. It might be fun to do something like that as well. So anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.